So glad you're tuned in to Talk Erie on the Joel Natale Show. We are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State this day after this historic election here, and give us his hot takes and cover the state of the races because, you know, not everything is buttoned up and ready to go here. We've got Jezree Friend, a political consultant here, and local, just all-around great guy. How are you, John?
Local all-around guy, Jezree Friend. Thank you so much. Joel.
Yes.
Hey, and thanks for having me on. And obviously, I want to reiterate what some of the callers were saying when I was driving in. And I like that Talk Erie is that place that we kind of had that community conversation.
Yeah.
You've really elevated that. We haven't had that in such a long time in Erie. So, and shout out to all your listeners who are being as loyal as you are. So thank you for calling in, and thank you for encouraging Joel and Channy and everyone that does all the good work.
Thank you, Jezree. Appreciate that. All right. This was a big one. I mean, we haven't had a former president regain the White House in, 120 plus years, right? I mean,
it's very uncommon, right? And it's very uncommon for someone to go back and run after losing election, in 2020. So it's such an unprecedented time. These are all very new things. It's unprecedented on the voter turnout. It's unprecedented on what we're going to talk about and see some of the swings where we saw voter demographics go one way and swing completely the other way this election. Things like the women turnout from Joe Biden to Harris is notable. Things like Latino males and the change that they had since Biden to now Harris and why that switched to Trump, or was it an anti-vote, or why did they turn out at all? These were all neglected, polled people, which showed now is honestly a landslide victory.
Yeah.
To note, there was an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer this morning, maybe this afternoon, but that Trump won with more votes than any Republican candidate for statewide in Pennsylvania ever.
Wow.
That's never happened before. We're talking
I know he definitely
outperformed.
He definitely outperformed McCormick. You know,
big time.
I mean, by like 300,000 votes or something like that, and probably the row offices too. Let's start micro, and then we'll start zooming out here.
Let's do it.
Because I got to say, the one part of this that I'm giddy about that is that if Donald Trump was going to win the national, I wanted him to win Erie because it keeps us in that special bellwether category. You realize if we would have picked Kamala locally, but Trump won nationally, we're never getting all the attention and the money and all the stuff that we get every 4 years. I don't think, anyway, Yeah,
selfishly, regardless of the way it went, I wanted Erie to be right.
Yes,
as a son of Erie,
exactly.
It's got to be right. And it was interesting as the night was going on, and this is, I'm sure there's going to be some stuff in the news tonight, and there'll be more conversation tomorrow as we learn more what happened at Erie County Election Office. They got it right, that they got all the stuff out, but it was more the conversation was the delay, right? Everyone was going to their after party, after the polls closed, you go to the party, after party powwows, everyone's looking at their numbers, you're checking your phone 1,000 times. And traditionally, by the time you're hitting 10 o'clock, you've got a good amount of numbers in here. By the time you hit 11, you just might know who won. We hit 11 and we still had 32% in after only the second data dump, right?
Yeah.
And so when you said, how does Erie County go, with the rest of the state, the numbers were already looking from all the other counties across the state that, oh my goodness, Trump may take Pennsylvania. Erie was still very blue, only because we didn't have any numbers in.
That's right.
Allegheny County, which houses Pittsburgh, very large, much larger than us. We had some faux pas in the past, really got their crap together, and their stuff was out. They were Johnny on the spot and got their numbers out quick. So kudos to them down there in Allegheny County. So there's going to be some questions on why did it take so long in Erie.
Yeah,
I don't know, and I'm not going to.
But I mean, I'm just wondering if it was a hangover from the mail-in ballot debacle with this vendor and the
right. We saw some stuff in the news the last couple of weeks on that, and I really couldn't say one way or the other what caused that. I mean,
we talked to the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Yeah,
he felt it was important to jump on our show here locally.
Wow.
From Harrisburg to say, hey, Al Schmidt's like, hey, okay, we've got it under control, but this is what you should do if you are still missing your ballot.
Wow.
Isn't that
such a unifying event that we had the national Republican and Democrat parties both suing our county government.
Yeah, exactly.
Inability to do their bureaucratic function.
Yeah.
So not a great look to start out the night for us, because with all eyes on us, by the way,
right.
Everyone's looking, what's going on with Erie? I'm getting texts from Australia saying, what's going on with Erie?
Yeah,
people in
numbers?
California,
Yeah.
some people I know in Nevada messaging me.
Wow.
What's going on? My friends in Harrisburg, what is going on up there? Someone literally sent me the Jim gif from The Office where he does the what is going on, because they're like, we need numbers,
Right.
So interesting to know. But yeah, starting at the local, eventually it did catch up.
But here's what's fascinating to me. Okay, so Trump, once we got the full bore, it literally, that last tranche of ballots was what put Trump over the edge, and was substantial in solidifying the Laughlin over Wart's win.
Yeah. That's geography too. So
true that. Yeah.
So like your first ones that come in purely by proximity is, so you think about it. If you're the judge of elections, you close down the polling precinct, you got your magic little box with a digital thing in the receipt. Mm-hmm. They have to physically then drive them to the courthouse downtown here, turn them in, get them uploaded, get the verification, et cetera, and then go through. So the ones that are going to get there first, the city of Erie districts are going to get there before Girard and Edinburgh and Springfield and Northeast and
Corey,
which are, more conservative in nature by purely demographic registration makeup.
Yeah.
So that's why you see red, candidates of the Republican persuasion, county-wide that's not the real numbers. When you're like, oh, they got a big lead. Well, they're expected to have a big lead in the city purely by registration. And
what I couldn't identify again as the of the different tranches rolled out is if we were getting an early mail tranche, because that happened in the primary.
Correct.
But remember, the primary workload was like probably 1/4 of the workload last night.
They had 40,000 requests from Erie County for a vote by mail. Now, that doesn't mean 40,000 people voted by mail. That's just a request. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, went and turned theirs in and voted in person. Some maybe still didn't at all, and maybe some still got lost in the mail debacle. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it probably wasn't 40,000 altogether there, but they are allowed to start counting those as soon as the workday starts on Tuesday, the day of election. So all those turned in. Those workers, before they're ever waiting for all the stuff to come in the evening, have the whole day to just start tabulating those. And so the logic there would be okay, as soon as the polls close, we have a fresh, decent amount of, between about 28 to 33,000 votes
that we can
to
put
know
out
where we're
there.
at. Yeah.
So Trump ends up winning Erie County again by the largest margin. Almost the combination of the margins from 2020 and 2016. I mean, it was a pretty sizable win for Erie County for Trump. But let's look at some of the other stuff here, because
it was 1,900 votes.
It's something like that.
Was
Yeah,
it, what was
like
it
almost
before?
2,000.
I think it was 1,100 before.
Yeah.
So it's significant, for sure. I mean, it's not a huge number in the grand scheme of numbers, countywide elections, but the fact that he lost it and gained those back, and then again, reflective of what happened in the statewide. He won statewide by 44,000 in 2020 to lose it by, was it 60? I'm going to get that wrong.
I thought he lost by 80,000.
80,000, that sounds right. All right. So by 80,000.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah, I'm really, the statewide numbers are really remarkable,
Over 100,000 right now.
Yeah. So, let me go to Erie County real quick. And so you've got, Trump over Harris by a 1.5 percentage points. You've got McCormick actually losing Erie County.
Correct, still.
But it's not super tight. It's about 1,700 votes, okay? And again, John Thomas, the Libertarian, got that many. The third parties actually made an impact there, but here's an interesting thing. If you remember correctly, Dan Pastore had a very strong showing in Erie County against Mike Kelly in 2022. Mike Kelly actually won Erie County against Norrie last night.
And I think Mike lost to Ron DeNicola.
Oh, absolutely. In
Right,
fact,
in 2018.
but they needed. Ron didn't get to the volume. You have to have a certain amount of volume out of Erie County to be competitive downstate. Yeah.
Because you have Butler and Mercer.
Yeah,
But yes,
well,
it is worth
even
noting.
Crawford too.
It's worth noting though that Mike Kelly pulled out by 7,000 votes. It's quite a bit.
But so for Erie County to go red for Congress and for Attorney General and for Auditor General and for State Treasurer, this is Erie County, mind you. And then, of course, when you go to the 49th Senatorial District, Laughlin winning by 11,000 votes.
11,000 votes and 8 points.
Yeah,
so interesting
wow.
on the Laughlin race. And then I want to say something about the row levels too at some point. But the Laughlin race there was some concern, I would say, in the Harrisburg circles that I know, saying, "Hey, Jezree, what's going on up in Erie? What are you hearing? What do you know?" And I know, right? And the thing is, though, that Senator Laughlin, he really does have the pulse of the community. And it shows. Again, we saw in the city people with Harris signs and a Dan Laughlin sign.
Wow.
I have not seen, and maybe there's an asterisk because it's probably a related family member, that you would see a Trump sign and a Wirt sign.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, but not as common. But I saw quite a few of Laughlin signs with Harris signs. And that just kind of shows maybe the loyalty, the appreciation, or the thankfulness. I don't know. Support
generally incumbents do well, right?
Sure.
It's hard to knock an incumbent out. But this was
the
really
registration,
an incumbent race last night.
Yeah, and with Senator Laughlin's race, on paper, it's a Democrat seat. On paper, it's a Democrat seat.
That's why they keep throwing.
And that's why
millions.
they keep throwing so many money, because they think, we can just take this.
Yeah.
The reality is, as we all know, Democrats in Erie, because it's hard to, it's not fair to broad brush stroke everybody, but they're not the same as Democrats in Philadelphia or in D.C. And that's what all these national pundits keep coming to us and asking, what is going on? I'm sure you've had your share.
Yeah.
A lot of us kind of have lately.
They don't understand what a Tullio Democrat is.
Yeah.
Down in D.C. in Silicon Valley.
I was on TV in Korea a couple weeks ago. I was like, I stayed up till midnight to do a Korean interview, and they're just like, we don't understand, like how. And I was like, because it's just different here. We have a lot of the same shared values. Mm-hmm. There's a union influence there, but there's a large community aspect there as well. And I think that's telling of PA, and that's kind of how we've seen some of those swings. You mentioned the row level offices. The GOP won all 5 statewide races for the row level offices. Of the 6 statewide executives that we have in Pennsylvania, the GOP now hold 4.
Okay, go through those with me.
Yeah.
Okay?
So at the top, the races last night of the statewide, you have the president, and then I guess I'm including Dave McCormick in that as a statewide because it's looking that way.
It's looking like McCormick.
I think it's narrowed down to about 30,000, maybe something like that. But
did you catch?
And that's the U.S. Senate race.
Senator Casey called us yesterday.
Wow. That is interesting.
Well, we invited them. We invited everybody, right? And he was able to call. And there was just a tone. Again, I don't want to try to psychoanalyze, but there was a tone. And he's a humble guy. He generally is, a humble, public servant or something. But you almost got a twinge, Jezree, that maybe
he was concerned.
Maybe this was going to be a goodbye.
That's interesting. I mean, there was definitely.
It's not confirmed yet, but
right, it's not confirmed yet. We saw a lot of that concern for everyone that was watching TV last night on whatever channel you're watching pretty quickly. You saw the pundits kind of like they saw it. They knew it. They've experienced this before. They didn't try to make excuses or justify it. They're like, this is what's happening, And so then that was a bigger conversation on messaging, parties, value proposition. We can get into that as well. That's surprising. I mean, Casey must have knew that it was close. Right. I'm pretty close.
Well, certainly more close than 6 years ago.
Correct. I'll say that's my big surprise of the night. I'll be honest.
McCormick over Casey?
McCormick.
Because it was an upward battle for McCormick all day long,
All day long. And even, there's a dear friend of mine who's very deep in the Harrisburg circles, and he literally calls when someone does well, he goes, those are Bob Casey numbers. If someone wins something, he goes, that's a Bob Casey number. Like there's a wall you just can't get touched. You're going to win. And so for that, I have always people, you think McCormick can win? And I said, yeah, the conservative side of me is going to say, oh, sure, there's a chance, right? But the political, if I'm being real with myself and being objective and just looking how it breaks down and looking at the historical context and just looking on the wall that exists, I say it is a long shot. It's not impossible. It is a long shot. And I was wrong.
Given what you just said about Pennsylvania statewide races in 2024, we have this conversation now that PA is starting to look very much like Ohio looked maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, and starting a trend that way.
Purple and really getting deeper red.
Well, there's something to be said about the voter registration that happened.
100%.
Right? 8 years ago, there was a 800,000 voter registration disadvantage statewide. Fast forward, it's 300-some thousand.
What? Yeah.
300-some thousand. It was a 600,000 voter registration swing. So when you had 8 years ago,
that's what the pundits like Elisa on Fox were saying. You gotta look at the registration, and that's how Trump won. Is that he played the long game 3 years ago in building up.
And the other part is in Pennsylvania, they finally started using the 3-point game. Right? I came on your show probably when it first happened 7 years ago, and the Republicans, fueled by Trump initially, if we can be real about this, refused to acknowledge mail-in voting as a reasonable alternative to vote. Yeah. And because they didn't like it, they were adverse to it and they pushed against it. All the while, the Democrats, very well organized, embraced it and got their people who has a larger voter registration advantage to utilize this as, hey, this is an alternative option. This is a convenient way to vote. And why shouldn't we make it convenient for people to vote? Now, still behind the 8 ball, mind you, it wasn't the party that did it. There's a guy, if you look him up, it's so random. He's pretty national now, but I actually went to college with him at Pitt Johnstown, and we were in student senate together. His name is Cliff Maloney, right?
Yeah.
Cliff Mahoney. Cliff has ran what is called the PA Chase.
Yeah, I know about this.
You know about this? I went to college with him.
Are you serious?
He rode in my then grandmother's red minivan that I had when I went to college to go do the Salvation Army mission work we did as part of our student work. Anyway, still friends with him.
Yeah.
But he due to some fundraising, was able to hire a full-time mini army across the state, and they chased 500,000 low propensity turnout voters over the course of summer to, one, convince them, educate them on ballots, convince them to request it, and then following up with them to make sure you turn your ballot in and get it in. These are people who were less likely to vote, but were likely, if they voted, to vote a conservative manner. So I'll say this, every row-level officer and the President of the United States should give Cliff Mahoney a call and thank him for doing that. And honestly, last night he was on some of the biggest networks talking about all the work he did, and he's earned every bit of it. So you want to say how we change that? Voter registration and chasing the ballots.
Jezree Friend is our guest here. We got to take a quick break. 424 at Talk Erie. Jezree Friend is our guest here on Talk Erie. We're doing some analysis of the returns. Two things before the bottom of the hour here. Number one, let's go right to the state of the state Senate and the state House. Again, we didn't see any change in Erie County. All of our incumbents won. But I'm sure there were open seats and some flips, right?
Yeah, a lot of competitive seats across the state. So to give your listeners a little bit of sense of some background here, right now the Pennsylvania General Assembly, not Congress in D.C., but in the House in Harrisburg, the Democrats have the majority by one seat. One seat is the difference. They have the Senate by a handful. So the Senate still remained in GOP control. But right now, as it stands, it is 99-99 in the Pennsylvania General Assembly House R to D. There are a couple seats that are too close to call yet, and one seat out in the Philadelphia area, which is surprisingly trending competitive. Last I checked, literally 2 hours ago, still only had 32% of the vote counted. I don't know what's going on there. It's Philadelphia. But it's weird because nowhere else around the Philly area was having an issue. So I don't know what the issue is there. But there's at least 3 seats that haven't been called yet that will determine the majority in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. My guess, just based on where they're located and kind of what we're looking at, I think the Democrats will remain control with 1 seat. Something notable I thought was interesting with the Pennsylvania House statewide, no state House incumbent lost last night. Not one. Every incumbent won. And that's interesting when you saw now I'm shifting to the federal, congressionally, there was 2 of them that flipped from blue to red. And
where at?
Susan Wild in the 7th Congressional District.
And Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania. And Matt Cartwright.
Okay.
Both eastern. Matt Cartwright outside kind of northeast Scranton area.
Sure.
I can't remember the gentleman's name who beat him. But then Susan Wild, an incumbent, couple-term incumbent, very competitive district in the Lehigh Valley area. She lost to a state House representative.
Wow.
And it was close, but that was really notable. So at a time when you did, we actually saw 2 congressional seats flip, which I think the Susan Wild seat was maybe a little more unexpected. We didn't see any incumbents flip R or D across the state. So worth noting for everyone listening when it comes to your Pennsylvania General Assembly.
Again, it really, really shows you how important those votes are, because again, we're seeing the tightness here. What do you? Well, I don't have enough time, but we need to talk about McCormick Casey and what are next steps for that, because I mean I think what is it statewide? It's 30,000 votes or something like that. I'm going to bring that up.
Let's bring it up and take a look. I can't remember, but I am curious to see where we're at on that.
Yeah.
It seems that it is trending towards McCormick.
Right.
You don't want to for sure say that, but it seems like it will likely go that way. The other thing is depending on how close will it trigger a recount if it falls under a certain threshold, because the one thing they are waiting on is those overseas military ones, things like that. So that could get determined. I don't know if it'll be enough though.
Yeah. I mean, this has got to be deja vu all over again for Dave McCormick when he had to go through the recount in the primary against Oz and lost
by 1,000.
Yeah, it is 4:30 Talk Erie. It's the day after a historic election, both here in Erie County, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and across the country. And to help us understand what these results mean is our political consultant, Jezree Friend. Jezree has conducted campaigns literally in Erie County and across the Commonwealth here. Jezree, thank you so much for joining us in our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. All right. Still very, very well. I should give a little news here that we're waiting on. I'm not sure we'll hear Kamala Harris.
At
but
4 o'clock, I think she's supposed to have
well, it's
announcement.
4:30 already, so
wow.
I think she's running a little late. But let's go back to Casey McCormick because again, this is still pending, right? And we were looking at it again. According to the electionreturns.pa.gov, Dave McCormick has like a 31,000 vote lead
at the moment. And it's interesting because it hasn't been called yet, and there's still, maybe an opportunity for some things to change in that case.
What triggers a recount?
It's a threshold. So if it's within so much of a percent, and I don't want to misquote that on
so
there.
Right now, it's a 0.5% difference between McCormick and Casey. So I'm wondering if it's under 1%, if that triggers.
It triggered a recount when we saw the primary with Dr. Oz and McCormick last go around, where it was within 1,000 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was quite literally crazy. But what's notable here is we like to talk about Erie and why we're so important, and we are. Mm-hmm. We are very important. We tell it to everyone who comes in because it's good for all these outside people to give us attention and say, hey, we're more than just a bellwether. We've got a lot of really cool things going on, and we should all capitalize on that and take that as an opportunity to spotlight the awesome things that are going on in Erie and maybe attract some new and exciting things and some general interest. But to note that yes, Erie County captured Trump winning, and then he did win statewide, but it also captured McCormick losing. People split their vote in Erie County where they voted for Trump, but they didn't all vote for McCormick.
Correct.
Will that, at the end of the day, be reflective of McCormick-Casey this time tomorrow when we have more information? I don't know.
Yeah, hard to know, right?
I don't know, but then it would show, again, Erie being that bellwether show, or we might be wrong on one, but we've been right on a lot of other things. So who knows? If people are trying to figure out how this could go, this is your smoking gun maybe.
Yeah, I mean, when you look further down on the ballot, basically it's saying that and this is what Senator Casey was telling us, is like if we can get to 7 million votes, it would be a big deal. We didn't get there, not with the Senate race, and I'm not sure. No, we didn't even get there with the presidential. We were short about 300,000 votes from that 7 million threshold.
Well, by looking at the numbers, we see that the voter apathy exists. And so then where is it coming from? So people voted at the top of the ticket, and for whatever their reason or motivation, hard to tell, they skipped some of that Senate race. They just went and voted for someone else, or they stopped. People do that, by the way, where they'll vote just president, and then like, that's enough for me. You're already there. Make your vote. Do your thing, But I don't know. I'm not in there with them. But it's also worth noting is where we saw some changes, okay, in demographic pools. So in 2020, President Biden beat President Bush, Biden beat Trump by 23 points amongst Latino men. 23 points, that's a landslide. It's significant, it's huge.
Yeah, sure.
Right? 4 years later, Trump beat Harris by 10 points with Latino men. There's where some of the votes went. Here's another thing. Amongst women voters,
I didn't realize he actually outright won.
It swung a full 33
Hispanic
points.
Men.
It swung 33 points from being a negative 23 to being a positive 10.
I thought the whole strategy was just to cut into some of the minority vote, especially with men.
They're going fast. So the Democrat Party or those candidates, maybe it's not fair to go to the party, those candidates need to say, what are we doing as a message that's driving that many humans away from us?
Wow.
Right? I mean, you could agree. I mean, and here's the thing, right? We've seen in our social media this morning and our friends who are saying, wherever you're falling on it, and let's say you're the person you just can't understand. You're asking yourself, I can't understand how a Trump won. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make sense to me because I'm so adverse to his personality, his character, his policy, whatever it is. I don't like him. How could he possibly win? Well, The alternative has not yet provided a strong enough value proposition or candidate to pull them away from a Trump. And if you really think Trump is that bad of a candidate, I think that's actually more reflective on your inability to message. He's that bad and you still can't win people over. You need to take a look in the mirror and say, what are we saying to people that we're pushing them away?
Yeah, the New Yorker had an article today that was just went full bore at the Democratic establishment and really blaming President Biden for the loss because he did not.
And the finger pointing is going to happen. And there's some stuff to blame there.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
The other thing I want to start was the female vote, which should have been, is like the obvious, like, hey, this is the strong suit for Harris for obvious reasons, right?
Right.
However, we saw Biden did better than Harris. Why? Biden he beat, in 2020, Biden beat Trump by 15 points with the female vote. Okay. Traditionally, females vote more Democrat than Republican. That kind of makes sense. You would think that would carry. However, Harris lost 5 percentage points amongst female voters. Harris only won by 10 points over Trump. Now, here's 2 questions. Does that mean Trump won over that additional 5%? Maybe. Or did that additional 5% go into the apathy pile and they didn't vote at all for either candidate?
Wow.
Anecdotally, there's people very close to me who that fit.
That they just said, I'm not going to deal with this.
They voted and they actually skipped the top of the ballot.
Oh, my
I personally
word.
know several people who did that. So I can't imagine they're the only ones. I'm thinking that's more reflective maybe of that missing 5% than maybe the ones that earned it. Not all of them, because I will say, you know, the Bill Clinton pocketbook thing that we've probably heard a couple of times today from other people, right? We've read it. The economy's getting harder. It was maybe we thought the economy message would play in 2020 or in 2022 during the midterms, and it didn't. We were kind of surprised, but it's been 4 years of it now.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to the point where we thought we could, if we wanted to buy a house, we thought we could buy now, and it's been 4 years and we still can't. We thought groceries would go down. We still haven't. And so the reality...
And my rent has gone up another 2 years.
And it's still going up.
Yeah.
And there's no slow in sight. So now we're throwing maybe those that would be more of the Democrat or liberal persuasion are saying, well, I can't stand the guy, but my goodness, I just need to afford life right now. Mm-hmm. And here's the bottom line. At the end of the day, we vote for what's going to make the most sense for our family, right? We take care of our own. And so when we're still paying these inflated prices, they're throwing Hail Marys and saying, how does those affect? You know, what can you expect in a Trump administration? Yeah. So let's get away from the politics for a second, if you'll allow me, and talk about, let's say, policy. Here's the stuff that no one's talking about. The reality is the corporate tax rate that was changed under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017 moved that down to 21%. There's active conversation amongst Biden that should he, when he was running as then candidate Biden for re-election, that he was going to raise that as it's set to sunset here in 2025, up over 30%.
Yeah.
Once Harris came into the picture, she recognized that was a crazy high number, dialed it back a bit, and only went with 28%. Hey, I'm still going to raise it, but only 28. Trump is saying, well, no, we're going to maintain status quo at 21. And in fact, I'm going to slowly edge that down to 15. What did we just see? The day after the election, the Dow is up 1,500 points right now.
Right.
The cost of oil immediately dropped 3%. These are people who in the market are betting on futures, knowing, oh my goodness, we think the economy could be better on that. There's not a political statement. It was purely based on economics. The economic movers and money banks of the world are saying, we think economically this could be a more advantageous position due to policy alone, not in a Democrat executive. Mm-hmm. That's how they're saying it. I'm not saying it. I can't control the Dow market, or I would. Right. I would. You know what I mean?
But if you remember what happened in 2016, you know, we had that stagnant 1% growth through much of the Obama years in recovery from the Great Recession.
2008,
2008. And then Trump wins, you know, in this
people saw
surprise,
it was possible.
And that stock market spiked.
And President Obama, by you talk about the GDP growth that stagnated 1%, President Obama was on the record saying, get used to it. You'll never see it go over 2. Just deal with it. Yeah. This is the new normal now. And then we saw it jump to triple that within a couple years. So now people go, it's possible. We just have to have different kind of leadership in. And I don't think that's a justification. It's more of an explanation.
Do you see anything, again, we want to talk about policy for a second here. Do you see any kind of stomach from either the Trump side or maybe the Republican Senate of saying, we've got to get fiscal spending under control. We are, you know, eating our grandchildren's lunch.
I would hope so, because that was definitely a big dropping of the ball of the Trump administration for his last time. He didn't, for being Republican, he's not a fiscal conservative. That was, as a conservative myself, my beef with him in the primaries back in the day, and I was looking at Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, right? The guy's not a fiscal conservative. He's a big spender. Now you have this really interesting coalition building thing going on, where you have, again, is consistent with Trump's if you will, for lack of a better term, I'd say establishment, swamp, they like to call people who are just not in the system. And you have this outsiders like an Elon Musk, quite the wild card, which could be a big turnoff for a lot of people. But then you have Elon Musk who's saying, hey, let's get spending under control. I can cut $3 trillion of this spending right now. So maybe those conservatives who are upset with Trump for not being conservative are saying, this is out of hand. Let's let the bull run through the china shop and see what happens. Could it really be worse?
Elon comes in to
what a unique
the Secretary of Commerce with a sink like he did at X, right?
I mean, the internet's going to get crazy in the next couple months, and we're going to have some great memes and great content.
That's a great segue. A lot of people think that one of the reasons why Trump won this time around is that Elon bought X, and so that there was not a total blackout of narratives. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's something to be said about that. They say that it wasn't being, our speech wasn't being monitored, but it was. Anytime you said something religious or faith-based in nature, it was flagged. If it was
back in the day, yeah.
Yeah, with the social media, 100% was.
Before Elon.
People were doing tests, and that wasn't. Now, I don't buy that, honestly, that changed any sense of the election. I don't see that.
Okay.
I think it's more economics.
What about this podcast thing that they're saying that
Joe Rogan?
That the young men... But the young men were activated by Trump going on, what was that? That's all those streamer podcasts and things like that, and Rogan.
And that's just good running political campaigns, is going and meeting different audiences. You saw...
So did she fall down on that?
Well, Harris actually did it, and it backfired on her, right? She did the media blitz.
When she went on The View.
She went on The View. She went on, well, here's an interesting bit, right? She went on, all right, so... Charlemagne the God, right? One of the largest radio streaming following amongst the African-American community and urban community, and just younger people, by the way, in general. He's a very famous rapper. And he actually has some really great conversations with people on that maybe people didn't expect him to kind of just call it out like it is.
Yeah, he doesn't just, buy everybody's line,
No, he holds them accountable. And he did that with Harris. And I think her campaign thought that they would just be a bunch of softballs. And what he came out there and said, hey, earn my vote, don't expect it. And then called out on saying, like, how are you going to earn, like, I matter too. Specifically, he was saying he felt like black men in America were being overlooked. What are you going to do? And she kind of had non-real, superfluous answers and kept her, finger to the fire and said, no, I'd like something real, and couldn't. And so they said, okay, thank you for coming on. And everyone saw through it.
Wow.
And so you see things like that where people are saying, hey, we all matter, all these demographics, and they do, because we're all Americans. And I'd like to say, take an opportunity to say something, we are all Americans here. The last time I was talking to a coworker who sees the world politically different than me. And she was like, man, I really wish we could the last time we were unified, unfortunately, was 9/11. And we haven't been there since. Now, I am of the position that we are not as divided as we were 4 years ago and 8 years ago. I don't see that being the case. But I would encourage everyone here. Not everyone's going to listen to me or take my worldview, but they will take yours. And to your 5 people in your circles of influence, those are people who are really close to you, a spouse, family member, your parents. And even if they agree with you and they're saying something negative about the opposite side, saying, all Democrats are communist socialists. That's not true. It's just not true.
Yeah.
So it's imperative on you to say, no, that's not true. Let's not talk like that. And let's have unifying conversations. If you're of the Democrat persuasion and you think democracy is now dead, you're going to be surprised when we have an election in a few months again for a primary. Right. You're going to be surprised when 4 years from now, we're going to have another presidential election and the Constitution forbids Trump to run again. He never will.
Yeah. If you want to participate in
hyperbole about all this, let's calibrate here. Not everyone who voted for Trump was racist yesterday.
No.
Stop saying it. And so if you really want unity, let's all be the bigger person and let's do that. And my wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she has a great line is, if you can't be kind, be quiet. So I say that to my children. And if we can't be kind, don't say anything at all.
All right. If you were, making the big bucks and the Democrats said, look, we got to bring in Jezree. We're going to figure this out. We're doing all this navel gazing and self-reflection here. What do they need to do? Because right now, if you ask me, they need a total rehash of what their core values and where their strategies are. And the mainstream media is been indicted, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because they carried the water for Kamala Harris during the brat, summer. Just totally softballing.
The media needs to be genuine again, right? People buy genuineness, right? They see through it. Just like, here's the example, even like with the Harris thing. My brother-in-law, who is not a Trump supporter by any sense of the imagination, sent me a video yesterday of Kamala Harris talking to supporters and saying, oh, it was like she was on a phone call, like she was at a headquarters. Oh, you voted for me. Thanks so much. I'm having a conversation. And then they all clap and she's like laughing. She turns the phone out to face the audience, and it was discovered she had her camera app on and wasn't on a phone call conversation at all. Disingenuous. Went back and continued her conversation, and we all had to just believe like we didn't just see that happen. And I'm not singling out Harris because both sides have crazy fat taboos. So when you ask what to be genuine, be sincere. When I've advised clients of mine, when they try to, hey, what's my message, right? And I have all these things I'm for. I said, people buy what you actually believe. And you say like, the first time I met Dave McCormick, I heard him give a speech here in Erie, and he's like, and I'm for this, and I'm for this, and I'm for this. And he went through his whole list. And then he paused, and he talked a little bit about, at the time, the whole, disaster that was the Afghanistan withdrawal. And then he went on to a bunch of other stuff. And a dear friend of me turned to me and said, well, Jezree, what do you think? And I thought, well, he checks all the boxes that a political consultant told him he needed to say that he's for and that he's against. But you know what I believed? That he was really pro-military and he cared about what happened with Afghanistan. That was a disaster. If I were him, I would only talk about that for a while because I believe it. Yeah. Talk about what you believe. So the Democrats need to do some soul searching. They need to identify what are our values and then be laser focused on those things. Because what they are is they are ostracizing large voting blocks, namely the unions. Right? We saw Trump.
You think they're ostracizing? They're maybe the union rank and file. I had this conversation at Democrat.
The union workers.
Yeah, the workers.
The labor.
There's a disconnect between the big shots and the actual workers.
Well, and not only that, I talked to a high-ranking person in the Republican apparatus.
Yeah.
On Monday, and was talking with the tops of some very large unions in Pittsburgh for the Trump rally, and said they told her, who do you need? Do you want them wearing their numbers or just hard hats? Is that good enough? We'll bring them to the Trump rally that was at
a Trump rally,
to the PPG Trump rally.
Wow.
On Sunday night. So they were there. So you're saying, so for the Democrats, it's saying, hey, we've got that. You can't guarantee, you can't count on having those labor union workers anymore. Yeah. The state union ones, they largely still fall that way. The teachers unions, things like that, they do still consistently turn out for the Democrat candidate. But the guys who work 506 here at WabTech, it's a pretty mixed bag.
Last question for Jezree Friend here. How do the Republicans not get over their skis? I mean, they're having a big night last night, but again, that could easily be turned into hubris.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the Trump phenomenon, so they get some of that, right? But outside of that, how do you win elections post-Trump not being involved anymore? Because you're not going to get, and that's what we saw in the midterms the last time Trump was involved. They couldn't turn out the vote for the midterms down the line. They're going to have to stay on their topics. We saw the economy was the winning message. We saw abortion was polling at 3 and 4th place. That the Democrats really doubled down on. They failed to make the kind of difference in that messaging. You're going to have to get better candidates. I encourage everyone, your identity can't be in one person. I went to college, have a master's degree in this stuff. My identity isn't in my political affiliation. Yeah. My identity isn't in a political candidate. They're going to come and go. If you have principles on things, I hope you hold those things dear to you, whatever they are, and they are not in a person. And I would ask everyone to take a look in the mirror and let's have our own identity, in other things. And our hope, by the way, my hope is not in this world, Joel.
Yeah.
It all comes and goes. My hope is in something else. And to any faith-based person in this world, I hope you can agree with that.
I'm going to leave it there. Jezree Friend, political consultant with his hot takes. We should, one more. Yeah.
Hey, I just want to thank you for having on. And I want to thank Erie County for being the bellwether of Pennsylvania and turning out the national election. Well done. And thank you for all turning out to vote.
You got it. Here it is, 5 in front of 5.